I was thrilled to start my new job as a security guard at a seemingly ordinary office building. The night shift was perfect for me, quiet, with plenty of time to catch up on reading. On my first night, the supervisor handed me a set of keys and showed me around the building. As the hours passed, I grew accustomed to the eerie silence. But then, around midnight, I heard a faint tapping sound echoing through the halls. Ignoring it at first, I continued my patrol until the tapping grew louder and more persistent. I followed the sound to a locked supply closet. With trembling hands, I unlocked the door and swung it open. To my horror, there was nothing inside but darkness and an old, rusted filing cabinet. I closed the door and hurried away, trying to shake off the feeling of dread. But as I continued my rounds, the tapping followed me, growing louder with each step. It seemed to come from all directions, surrounding me in a cacophony of noise. Then, as suddenly as it started, the tapping ceased. In its place was a chilling silence that made my skin crawl. I decided to radio my supervisor, but when I reached for the walkie-talkie, I froze. Someone was standing behind me. I turned slowly, my heart pounding in my chest. There, in the dim light of the hallway, stood a figure shrouded in darkness. Its eyes glinted with malevolence as it reached out a hand towards me. Terrified, I stumbled backward and fled down the hallway, the sound of my own footsteps echoing in my ears. I didn't stop running until I reached the safety of the lobby, where I collapsed in a trembling heap. The next morning, I handed in my resignation without a second thought. I never returned to that building again, but the memory of that first night still haunts me to this day. My first day as a hotel receptionist started off like any other. The manager showed me the ropes, explaining the check-in process and how to handle guest inquiries. Everything seemed normal until the sun began to set, and the hotel took on a sinister atmosphere. As the evening wore on, strange things started happening. Lights flickered without reason, and doors slammed shut on their own. Guests complained of hearing whispers in the hallway and feeling cold drafts in their rooms. I tried to dismiss their concerns, assuring them that it was probably just faulty wiring or a drafty old building. But deep down, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was terribly wrong. It wasn't until I was alone at the front desk that things took a turn for the worse. As I sat there filling out paperwork, I heard the unmistakable sound of footsteps coming from the empty hallway behind me. I turned around, expecting to see a guest approaching the desk, but there was no one there. I shrugged it off, chalking it up to my imagination. But then the footsteps grew louder, closer, until they were right behind me. I spun around again, my heart pounding in my chest, and that's when I saw her. A young woman dressed in old-fashioned clothing, her eyes hollow and empty. I screamed and stumbled backward, knocking over a chair in my haste to get away. But when I looked back, she was gone, as if she had never been there at all. I spent the rest of the night in a state of terror, counting down the minutes until my shift was over. When morning finally came, I fled the hotel and never looked back. But the memory of that first night still haunts me, and I can't help but wonder what other horrors lurk within its walls. On my first day at the call center, I was excited to finally have a steady job with decent pay. But as soon as I stepped through the doors, I felt a wave of unease wash over me. The office was dimly lit, with rows of cubicles stretching out as far as the eye could see. The air was thick with the sound of ringing phones and the murmur of hushed conversations. But despite the bustling atmosphere, there was something undeniably eerie about the place. As I settled into my cubicle and began taking calls, I couldn't shake the feeling that someone, or something, was watching me. Every time I glanced over my shoulder, I half expected to see a shadowy figure lurking in the darkness. But the real horror came when I received my first strange call. The voice on the other end was distorted and garbled, barely human. It whispered incomprehensible words that sent shivers down my spine. I tried to ignore it and focus on my work, but the calls kept coming, each one more unsettling than the last. And then, just when I thought it couldn't get any worse, the power went out. The office was plunged into darkness, the only light coming from the glow of computer screens. Panic rippled through the room as my coworkers fumbled for their phones, trying to illuminate the darkness. But as I sat there in the pitch black, I felt something brush against my leg, something cold and clammy. I screamed and scrambled out of my chair, searching desperately for the light switch. When the power finally came back on, I was alone in my cubicle, my heart racing and my hands shaking. I quit on the spot, never looking back as I fled the building and vowed never to return. Each of these first-day horror stories offers a glimpse into the terror that can lurk just beneath the surface of the mundane. From haunted buildings to sinister call centers, the first day on the job can be a harrowing experience that leaves a lasting impression on those who endure it.